Frog Prince. In olden times, when wishing was still of some use, there lived a king whose daughters was all beautiful. But the youngest was so very beautiful that the sun itself was amazed each time it shone upon her face. Close to the king's castle was a large dark forest where an old lime tree with spreading branches grew. Beneath the tree was a fountain. Whenever the day was hot, the king's child would run there to play, taking with her a golden ball. Over and over she threw it up and caught it, and this ball was her favorite toy. Now, one day it happened that the golden ball did not fall back into her hand, but rolled over the rim of the fountain. The king's daughter followed the ball with her eyes, but it sank slowly and vanished beneath the clouded water. Then the daughter began to weep, and her tears came harder and harder. She thought she was all alone, but suddenly she heard a voice. "Why are you weeping, king's daughter? Your tears would melt even a stone to pity." She looked around and saw a frog stretching its thick, ugly head from the water. "Ah, water paddler, so it was you that spoke," she said. "I am weeping for my golden ball, which has slipped away from me into the fountain." "Listen, then, and do not weep," answered the frog. "I will fetch your plaything up again, but you must give me something in return." "What will you have, dear frog?" she said. "Perhaps my pearls and jewels, or do you want my golden crown?" "I care nothing for wealth," the frog answered, "but if you will love me and let me be your companion, and sit at your table, and eat from your plate, and sleep in your little bed, if you will promise me all these things, then I will dive down into the water after your golden ball." "Yes, yes, I promise," she said, but she thought to herself, "What is the silly little frog saying? Let him stay in the water with other frogs? He can never be my companion." The frog had heard only the promise and not the thought. At once he plunged his head into the water, kicking hard with his legs. Down, down, down he swam, then came up again with the golden ball and threw it in the grass. With a cry of delight, the king's daughter took her beautiful plaything and ran off through the forest. "Stop, stop," cried the frog. "Take me with you. I cannot run as you can." But all his croaking was no of use, and the king's daughter never listened. The next evening, when she was sitting at the table with her father and all his courtiers, something came creeping, splish splash, up the marble stairs. At the top it knocked upon the door and cried, "Let me in, youngest princess, let me in." So she rose to see who had called her. When she opened the door, there sat the frog. Her heart began to beat violently, and she slammed the door shut and returned to the table. The king saw that she was frightened and asked her if perhaps a giant had come to fetch her away. "Oh no," she answered, "it is no giant but a horrid frog." "And what does he want with you?" asked the king. "Ah, dear father, yesterday when I was playing near the fountain, my golden ball fell into the water. I cried so much that the frog carried it up again. But first he asked me. I promised him he could be my companion. I never thought he would leave the fountain, but somehow he has jumped out and now he wants to come in here." Then the king said, "What you have promised you must fulfill. Go at once and let him in." So the daughter went and opened the door. Then the frog hopped in and followed her, step by step, to her chair. "Lift me up," he croaked. "I am not so large as you are." She delayed and delayed until the king commanded her to do it. Once the frog was on the chair, he wanted to be on the table, and once he was on the table, he wanted to eat from her golden plate. "Push it close to me," he said, "so that we may share the food between us." The girl could not eat a mouthful, but the frog finished everything. At last he said, "I am tired now. Carry me to your room, and then we will sleep in your silken bed." She began to cry, for she was frightened of the cold, ugly creature who was now to share her bed. But the king was angry and said, "He who helped her when you were in trouble must now not be despised." So the girl took the frog up with 2 fingers and put him in a corner of her room. But as she lay in her bed, he crept up it. "Put me on your pillow beside you, or I will tell your father," he said. No longer could she bear it. Catching hold of the frog, she threw him with all her might against the wall. "Now, will you be quiet, you ugly frog?" she screamed. But at the moment he fell, he was changed from a frog into a prince. He told her he had been under a spell of an evil witch, and that only a king's youngest daughter had the power to rescue him from the fountain. Her father had said he must be her companion. Now that he was a prince, she wanted to marry him, and he could hardly refuse. They were soon betrothed, and next morning when the sun rose, a carriage drawn by 8 white horses came up to the palace. Behind it stood faithful Henry, the servant of the prince. When his master was changed into a frog, faithful Henry had grieved so hard that he had bound 3 iron bands around his heart for fear that it would break. But now the prince was saved, and they were returned to his own kingdom. Faithful Henry helped the bride and the bridegroom into the carriage and sat down on the seat behind. They had not gone far when the prince heard a crack as if something had broke. "Henry, the carriage is breaking," he said. "No, master, it is not the carriage, but a band around my heart that was put there to keep it from breaking when you were bewitched." Twice again along the journey there was the same cracking sound, and each time the prince thought some of the carriage had given away. But it was only the breaking of the last bonds around faithful Henry's heart. Now that the prince was set free, his servant had no more need of them.